I said, I come from a family that got split up early on. So
Mm.
starting it off with the loss felt like at a young age. Nothing really I can control, of course.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Real Men, Real Talk. This is the place where we talk about things that most men won't talk about. Well, we're actually going to be starting a series on fatherhood because we're getting around Father's Day. And I thought, hey, this is a conversation that not a ton of guys that I talk about have. Like even my next door neighbors and stuff, like it just doesn't come up in everyday conversation. So, 3-part series. We're going to first talk about sonship. What did we learn as sons? Okay. And no, this is not going to be a bash your dad episode. Some of us don't have dads. Some of us would have loved to have had a dad. So we're going to be as balanced as we can be with that. Second episode will be about us being fathers. So that's kind of going to be the fatherhood episode. And we're going to be asking ourselves, how are we doing as dads? And for Mick here, we'll be asking him, like, what does he hope to be as a dad? Because even if you don't have sons, I'm sure you've thought, well, I wouldn't do that, or well, I would do that different. We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see how that goes. It'll be a little bit of introspection time on that episode. And then the final episode will be, okay, given these two categories of sonship and fatherhood, what can we do today to have a bit better relationship with our fathers, for those of us who still have fathers? I know some people out there, they don't have a father in the picture, whether it be like he's living on the streets, he's in jail, he's in another country. Some people he's passed, like he died recently, or, they died when they were young. So we can't speak to every situation. We're just going to do our best to speak to the situations that we know, and we're going to tell some stories and maybe, just maybe, offer you a little bit of perspective on some things that you can do with your dad. So, without further ado, thank you for listening to that long intro. We're going to start with Mr. Tilghman. Okay, Tilghman, what has been your experience as a son to your father? And yes, his dad does listen to the podcast.
Whew, I'm on hot plate right now. So my dad was great. Can we go on to the next question?
Awesome. Good job, Tillman.
I know, right? So,
Yes.
no, but when I think about my sonship and growing up with my dad and stuff, first thing that comes to mind is football, because that was like our common ground. Football, wearing a Chiefs jersey the day I was out the womb kind of situation. And, so it was always, oh, my initials are TDB. So he was like, oh yeah, touchdown Booth, so it's like, yeah, so dude, I'm
Wow.
obsessed with it, right? So yeah, and I've scored a couple touchdowns here and there in my lifetime, but yeah, so like I said, the first thing I think about is football, just because that was where I feel like our relationship was really well established. We had something to talk about, something to kind of have a common ground on, and when I was in third grade, that's when I first started playing organized leagues and everything like that. He happened to be
Wow.
one of the coaches over the Pee Wee years. Like he would always be a parent, but he'd get involved with, like, halfway through the season, become a coach. So it's like,
Dog.
yeah. So I was like, dude, my dad's a freaking goat for doing that. So it's a super, super cool situation. So he'd be out there, and when we were younger, all the coaches and dads would line up in front of us, and we'd be hitting them like halfway, like all the pads and everything like that. But yeah, so seeing my dad do that, and then just seeing him get up and grind daily at a company for the time that he was working at a company that he worked for 30 years, it's just seeing him get up and work and everything like that. So, but being a son was, it's fun to be a son. It's also hard work if your dad's a hard worker too. So so my
Okay.
dad, always involved in like service stuff. And of course, I grew up in a church where service was like a good thing to do. Like they really pushed on service, which is awesome. Sometimes when you're young though, you don't want to do service, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, I just want to be lazy today. But so no, I learned a lot from my dad though. He taught me how to work hard. Growing up and seeing the things that he did then, and being a father now, I'm starting to see like, oh wow, like, you realize like, hey, this is his first time through life too. So it's like, wow,
Mhm.
he's taking his first step at the plate too. So he's just giving me everything that he can, in regards to knowledge and stuff like that. Um, experience is good and bad, but I feel like the majority of it is positive. Like there's things today where it's like, um, where you look back and you're like, oh yeah, I've got that trick because my dad taught me that, right? It's like teaching you the trick of the Oreos and cookie kind of situation or something like that. You take those traits with you as you get older, but yeah, so I feel like being a son and stuff like that, he'd always push me to be my best and do the best I could. But I feel like, in today's age, I put a lot of weight on my shoulders because of that too. So I'm like, I gotta be a hard worker. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. And I get anxiety or I get like really pressured mentally. And I'm just like, oh no, like I didn't live up to it. So I almost still have, my dad could be that angel on my shoulder, like, oh, you got to do better. You got to do better. You can be better at this. You can be better at that. So always getting pushed to be the best version of myself, which growing up was amazing. But at the same time, as a kid, or just like a pre-adolescent teen, you're just like, oh man, this is a lot, So it's like, but I wouldn't say it's a blame, but I do carry a lot of pressure on myself to be better than I was yesterday because of that. So it's not a bad thing, but growing up and being a son to it was like, oh man, this is a lot. Like it's making me want to push away from this guy a little bit, like, but as I've gotten older and
Yeah.
become a father and gotten into adulthood, it's like, okay, dad wasn't so crazy, because I do want to be better. I do want to do this. Whether he taught it in the most loving way, sometimes, but it was with love at the end of the day, so.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
yeah, sorry, that was a long rant, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's, I love my dad. So
Well, I mean, that's a hard question to ask because it's like, hey, sum up your your entire like raising with your dad here in like 30 seconds or less. Like,
yeah,
like impossible.
Mm.
Hey guys, just chiming in here to remind you guys, if you love this content and you want to hear more, hit that bell, like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. Now, back to the episode. So, yeah, like relationships with dads are not they're not all sunshine and rainbows, and I think pretty much every listener here probably knows that. But yeah, like it's one of those things like they did try. Like for most dads, like even if they sucked, like they did try somewhat. Um so I don't know, just yeah, can be complicated. So Mr. Mick, so what has been your experience as a son?
Lessons, 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 learning, lessons, losses, learning, lessons, loss. So gaining, losing, like I said, I come from a family. I got split up early on. So starting it off with the loss. Felt like at a young age, nothing really I can control, of course. You know what I mean? But really just being my parents' biggest lessons, going on, doing my own thing, talking to my father, starting to kind of not really hold him accountable for things, but knowing where his role was outside of that relationship and that, what happened, things like that, and not necessarily putting things onto an individual that's out of their control. You know what I mean? So just being my father's number one lesson, stepfather, my parents, still to this day, both of my parents, my dad's like, tell me I'm ridiculously wise for my age. So, and
They
that's
say
one,
they say that about you, that you're ridiculously wise for your age.
yeah.
Okay. And when you say lessons, 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 like what are some that maybe come to mind?
I mean, lessons through loss. You know what I mean? That's really what it comes down to. If you don't have somebody that's really there to guide your hand, you kind of got to do it yourself. So just kind of learning things, being open, taking like what Tillman said. I could kind of relate to that, where you were talking about how you had, a father that was super, super supportive. Like that was like that was like my biological dad on one side. He was the one to tell me, you can do it, you can do this, you can do this, you can fly to the moon if you want. You know what I mean? I'm calling him every weekend, but I never see him. I never see this individual, but he tells me all this stuff that he believes I can do. And then I go back home to my stepdad and I tell him, oh, I want to be in the NFL. He said, oh, well, this is statistic. 3% of 1% of people. You know what I mean? That's what you're gonna get with the military sergeant. You know what I mean? So it's like, wake up. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to navigate through both of those worlds in my life and really just kind of finding myself within it and not being like apologetically myself, really being unapologetically myself. So like,
Okay. So so tell me if I'm wrong here. So you're like taking lessons from both dads and essentially trying to like figure out like, okay, here's what I do with that. Is that my understanding you correctly?
yeah, but really not using either of them as, I mean, necessary full guidance. You know what I mean? Just it's hard to explain. It really is kind of hard to explain, but just continuing to learn not to hold them accountable for certain things, certain tasks. You wanted to go out and play football. You want to go get better at football. You got to go do it yourself. You can't expect dad to be there to throw you football. I mean, you want to go do this, learn how to shave. You know what I mean? You got to do it yourself. You ain't, you know. And it's not a thing where you can spite somebody for that either, because then you're looking at it from the standpoint of, you know, my father, my actual biological father. You know what I mean? It wasn't really his choice to be out of the picture, and for him to kind of subject his way back into the picture for a while growing up, I was really kind of spiteful of my dad. I'll be like looking at him like, dang, why aren't you coming back? Why aren't you trying to come to Kansas? But then I grow older and I'm an adult and I'm looking at the situation. I'm like, it would have caused way more hurt to the whole relationship dynamic in the household than if he just would have done what he did, you know.
Maybe, yeah. Well, that's I'm sorry
Deep,
that it's complicated.
very complicated, but it's not that complicated because we keep everything like surface level, but it gets deep. So we know each other, but we can talk about just a million stuff.
Okay.
Same with my stepdad. When I was living over there, we talked about a lot of stuff and then have some good conversations. Every single morning, he'd get up ready for work. I'd be up there with him, coming back from work because I work third shift. I'd see him at 6:30. We'd chop it up about just a bunch of stuff. There's no really any barriers with that, so you can just kind of say
Okay.
how you feel about certain things. So, I don't know.
Okay.
Or some people I feel like might be worried, be like, "Oh, I can't say this around my dad. He's gonna think I'm this. He's gonna, you know what I mean?"
Okay. So complicated. Like
Very
it.
complicated.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel you there. Like I feel like I fall maybe a little bit in between like you and Tillman on that respect. So I don't know if my dad is gonna watch this episode. Like I don't know if he watches every episode. He might, for all I know. Um, so something I don't know for like maybe the last few years. Like, let me see, man. Where do you start? Like, how do you encapsulate your relationship with your dad,
Yeah.
especially if your dad might be watching? Um,
Yeah. Welcome to
it's
the circus.
Let me just pretend that I'm sitting by the fire pit with my buddies. That's probably the best way. Um, my dad was and is a good man. Um, he is also wasn't and is also not a perfect man. Like none of us are perfect.
Mhm.
Um, if there was like some lessons that I took from like let's just say my teenage years, it was like work your beep off, work your butt off, and be a good man, be honest, be you know, be a hard worker, and the cream will rise to the top. Like that's like been my takeaway uh, from when I was a teenager and young. However, one of the things that I didn't get so much of was like the emotional like training. Um, and like I find now I'm having to really work hard to be like emotionally available to my wife, my kids, and stuff like that. And when I say emotionally available, I don't just mean like laugh, cry, stuff like that. Like I'm not a sociopath or psychopath or whatever. Like I do laugh, I do cry. Like there's all that stuff. But to respond in like a very like measured and appropriate way to different situations. I'm not super good at that. I seem to kind of go to extremes. Like I can either get too angry about something or I can have too much fun with something.
I feel you.
Um, and then like a lot of the places in between, I just sort of just like nose to the grindstone work. that's it. So something I've been learning though is like, I recently learned something about my dad. I'm not going to air his dirty laundry here. It's just that I learned some things about his past that really told me a lot of why he was the way he was. And I've heard a number of guys say like, "Oh, my parents did the best they could." It's hard to say. Like you can't say your parents did the best they could unless you really know their story. Like you can't say that with integrity unless you know what they've overcome. And I learned some things about my dad's story that are just heartbreaking. And when I heard those things, I'm like, oh my gosh, like no wonder why he was this way when I was young. And I don't know, it's not to write him off. Like we all make mistakes. Like next week, we're going to get into like how we as fathers make mistakes. And we can't always blame our dads. Like there's a time for that. Like when you're young and you're just like sopping up everything that your parents say. But we're adults now and it's time to take responsibility for our own actions. Well, guys, I feel like that's probably the good place to pause it right there. Maybe this week, just think about what was it like to be a son to your father? And if you didn't have a dad, I'm sorry. There was probably a guy in your life. I hope there was a good man in your life who took you under his wing in a good way. Maybe think about like, what was it like to learn from this guy, whoever that was? Just do some self-reflection and then maybe you'll find like, wow, like, oh, that's why I do that thing. Or like, oh, maybe that's the way I am right there in this situation. I think just this week, yeah, just try to notice because next week we're going to be going over like how that can sort of carry in to your fathering if you guys are a father and carry into your day-to-day life. Even if you're not a father, guarantee you, I've caught myself at it. There's things that you do where you are exactly like your dad or your father figure. If it was a coach, if it was an uncle. So that'll be a fun little set of stories to explore. So good luck, man. Get out there and just kind of notice what's going on. We love you and hope you have a good week.